Hi, I'm Pamela, the Sewing Queen. Some people have asked me throughout my life, why and how did you learn to sew? Well, when I was a little girl, I used to pull up a chair to my mom's, to the side of the sewing machine where mom was sewing, and I would watch her. I just loved it. I loved to see her create things. Um, so as soon as I could reach the pedals, she would allowed me to use her sewing machine. She showed me how to do some simple things. And when I was younger, I did things by hand, but this was actually getting to use the sewing machine now. And so I started sewing, and she would show me each step, like, okay, sew this, and then I would sew that. And if I couldn't figure out the next step by the pictures of the pattern I was using, then I would find her wherever she might be doing chores in the house or whatever and say, okay, Mom, what do I do next? She'd tell me what to do next. Well, eventually, after doing this all the time, I got to know how to read a pattern and started sewing for me and my sisters, my dad, my brother, um, anybody that wanted sewing. Here's what happens when you are a sewist. Uh, People that don't sew, they'll come to you and say, oh, you know how to sew? Oh, could you sew this up for me? And so by the time I was 12, 13 years old, I was actually sewing for others, and they would pay me a few bucks. Now, it wasn't worth my time, of course, but it was certainly worth the knowledge and the practicing of doing it. Eventually, I was 16, so I'm like, oh, I got to work in the fabric store. So I did. I went to work for the fabric store. Boy, I was just in heaven, getting to see what everybody else was making, and it inspired me to do even more. And at a young age, 21 years old, they offered me a management position for House of Fabrics. So I thought, well, I'll take it because I love this so much. And then the challenge was on. Because of my age, I needed to prove to people that I knew everything there was to know about sewing. And so that I could help clients and whatnot. So the years go by, and I'm still sewing because it was my passion. Eventually, I never thought that I would actually open up an alteration business of sewing because I just like to sew from patterns. Uh, Um, but I made dresses. I only wore dresses to work, and they were only dresses that I had made. I just loved it so much. I'd work all day and then go home and sew. That's what I did. But eventually, things changed, and I went to work for a formal wear factory. So then, not only did I know pattern sewing and fix-its here and there, I got to learn what it was like to work in a factory. Hence, I fell in love with sewing on formal wear. But I could do anything because I'd set my mind out to learn everything there was to know. I learned when I was in the fabric store business, these ladies that were older and had much more time in, they'd say something and it would click, and I'd have to go home and try it out, just so that I knew what I was doing. Eventually, I had children. Um, 20, I was 29 and 31, had a son and a daughter, had kind of, laid low a little bit, but then started working with a friend of mine who had an alteration business, and come to find out, wouldn't you know it, I fell in love with alterations. Fixing things and making them fit your body just perfect was where it was at. Now I don't even care to sew from a pattern. I'd rather just fix what you've purchased off the rack to fit your body perfectly. So with that under my belt, I eventually opened up my own alteration center. It was a huge success. So huge, in a small town that I lived in, I couldn't keep up with the demand of people's needs. So I had to start hiring people. That was, and still is, a bit tricky because a lot of people know how to sew, but they might not know how to fit a garment to a body, or they might not know the shortcuts. Hence, when you're sewing for a certain amount of money for what you're doing, if you're not fast at it, well, time is money, as they say. So it's nice throughout the years that I have found out some faster ways of doing things. Of course, YouTube now for your generations, you can figure out just about anything, but it's nice to actually have a set program, which is what I'm working towards to put out there for any persons that have the knowledge of sewing but want to learn how to do it faster and better. And there's many techniques to doing this. I'm still sewing, probably be sewing till the day I die. It's my passion, which I was able to turn into an income, and I'm one of the few people that can say I love doing what I do for a living. So, being as I've learned all of these things from many different seamstresses, and some from YouTube, not much, I'm not very computer literate, but some, or just talking to people and whatnot, I would like to pass down what I've learned to you so that you can have a sewing business, alterations, making things fit people perfectly and whatnot, and actually have an income doing what you love to do. Thank you for checking out our courses, and I'll see you next time.